John is a total loser rookie who finally managed to land a job. However, his boring corporate life takes a wild turn when his smoking hot boss accidentally falls in love with him. Now, she'll do absolutely anything to make this clueless guy fall head over heels for her. It all started with Isuza marching towards her office building with her juggling juggernauts. Soon, Isuza makes it inside the publicity department. Just then, a coworker named Minori approaches Isuza with a problem, but she gives her a solution as if it was nothing. She then turns her attention to this limpy noodle, Kasuke, while simultaneously scolding him for the messy state of his desk. While their coworkers admire how reliable Isuza is, Kasuke and a few others quietly admit that she can be pretty intimidating. Suddenly, the department head, Eiji, calls Isuza over to share some news. He informs her that a new hire is joining the team and that he wants her to be the one to train him. Isuza accepts the task with a polite smile, but on the inside, she's actually quite miserable about the situation. A few moments later, the new guy John arrives with an energetic greeting. When he's introduced to Isuza, she greets him with her usual icy demeanor, even though she is secretly thinking about how handsome he looks. She manages to keep her emotions hidden, vowing to do her best as a mentor despite her total lack of social skills. She then takes John to the merchandising room, explaining how the company branched out from game development into real estate and apparel. She also gives him a rapid-fire tour of the office, showing him everything from the copy machine to the snack area, and walks away feeling like she's given a perfect orientation. However, Isuza soon realizes she got so caught up in the tour that she completely forgot to tell John what his actual job duties are. When he sheepishly points this out, Isuza quickly pivots and tells him he'll be sniffing her bodily fluids in an upcoming business meeting. Before they head out, Isuza decides they need to practice exchanging business cards. She tries to demonstrate the proper technique, but in her nerves, she fumbles with her card holder and sends her cards flying across the floor. This makes her freeze in embarrassment, but John quickly gathers them up and hands them back with a smile. They then move on to the actual meeting with clients. And while Isuza looks like a seasoned professional on the outside, she's secretly fighting a battle with her own nerves because she can feel John watching her every move. The meeting is mentally exhausting for her, and once it's over, John praises her for being so professional, which only adds to her inner stress. Later that afternoon, Isuza thinks about inviting him out to a nice restaurant, but her social anxiety starts to spiral. She begins to worry that inviting a subordinate to lunch might be seen as creepy, and then she starts panicking over what kind of small talk they would even have. This internal conflict makes her look distressed, and in a moment of pure panic, she tells John she has another meeting and flees the scene, sighing over the fact that she can't even handle a simple lunch invitation. Moments later, John stops by her desk to say goodbye and thanks her for her help, admitting he was really nervous about his first day. Isuza manages to give him some genuine encouragement, telling him it's okay to make mistakes and that he can always rely on her. But when she walks home, she realizes that she spent more time worrying about her own image than actually focusing on how John was feeling. The next day, Isuza vows to do better, but while greeting her coworkers, she coldly tells people to move out of her way so her dumpers can reach her desk without any collision. In her mind, she's being friendly, but to everyone else, she's just as scary as ever. Later, she assigns John a project involving a manga studio and gives him some of her past work to use as a reference. She decides that today is the day she will definitely take him to lunch, but she ends up being too late. By the time she gathers her courage, John is already back at his desk with a cup of instant noodles. Isuza immediately scolds him for eating something so unhealthy, but her mood drops when John explains he's just trying to stick to a budget. Now, Isuza goes to a diner alone, feeling like a total failure as a mentor, while remembering how her own senior used to take her out for encouraging meals. While she's eating, Isuza gets a call from her former mentor, Ritsu. They discuss some upcoming projects, and Ritsu eventually teases her about having a mentee of her own. He warns her that younger employees these days won't hesitate to quit if they feel unsupported, which sends Isuza into another panic. He suggests she read some self-help books, and on her way home, she buys several books on communication and mentorship. That night, Isuza finds herself eating the same cup noodles she scolded John for, all while practicing friendly smiles in a mirror like a Japanese Jeffrey Epstein. The result is so unsettling that she eventually gives up, feeling like she isn't cut out for the job. The following day, Isuza gets up late and has to rush to work. She makes it in time and acts like everything is fine, but her day takes a dark turn when she overhears some coworkers gossiping about how she has zero social skills and is only respected because she's good at her job. The comments hurt so much that she drops her tablet, which reveals all the sticky notes she made about how to talk to people. John sees the tablet and the hurt expression on her face, but before things can get even more awkward, he steps in. He walks over to the gossiping coworkers and tells them how lucky he feels to be working under Isuza, mentioning that he's already seen her kind side. At this point, the coworkers are mortified that they were caught, but Isuza whispers a tiny thank you to John.
Oh my god! Okay, it's happening!
A few days later, Isuza is commanding an important business meeting, discussing a new game project called Racing Girls. Her plan involves a maid cafe event where the game's characters will be brought to life by staff in costume, while the cafe's interior will be transformed to mirror the game's actual map. As she speaks, John watches from the sidelines like P. Diddy, completely struck by how composed and authoritative she appears. Once the presentation wraps up, Isuza shifts back into mentor mode. She tells John that he'll be working on this project alongside her and hands him a stack of documents to complete. She then tries to leave the building with her usual air of mystery, intending to finally invite him to lunch. But her cool exit is immediately ruined when she scans the wrong card at the security gate and gets rejected. Back at the office, the focus shifts to the Racing Girls game itself. Isuza notices John playing it and confirms that she also plays, claiming it's strictly for market research, even though she secretly is a gaming gooner. Seeing him struggle with a race, she decides this is the perfect opportunity to show off her expertise. Having been a former game tester, she's confident she can master the mobile version easily. But the transition from a controller to a smartphone proves more difficult than she anticipated. She gets so into the race that she starts physically leaning and swaying with every turn, eventually losing her balance and falling right off the couch. To save face after such a clumsy display, she insists on a rematch in multiplayer mode, though she spends the rest of the afternoon feeling like she failed to look like a reliable senior. Around lunchtime, Isuza tries to find the right moment to ask John out, but every time she works up the courage, she gets distracted by a coworker. She feels a brief pang of jealousy when she hears another colleague invite John to lunch, but she's secretly relieved when he turns the offer down because he brought his own meal. When Isuza finally returns to her desk, she catches him pulling out a humble cup of instant noodles. Learning that he's on a strict budget to save money, Isuza decides to take charge and announces that she's treating him to a meal. She brushes off his attempts to decline by insisting that, as his mentor, it's her job to ensure he has a thunderously firm sausage. At the restaurant, Isuza feels a quiet sense of victory for finally making the lunch date happen. She's so lost in thought about how her own mentor once trained her that she doesn't even notice John performing the standard junior duties, like setting out napkins and water, which were things she had planned to teach him herself. However, the mood shifts when their food arrives, and she sees that John only ordered a small salad. Isuza immediately scolds him for his poor diet and dumps a large portion of her own steak onto his plate. When she asks why he's being so frugal, John admits he spent his money on an expensive model kit. But instead of judging him, Isuza relates to his passion for hobbies like a classic anime dork, though she uses the moment to remind him that health should always come first. She even makes a mental note to stop staying up all night for her own gaming marathons. But later that night, Isuza ignores her own advice and stays up for hours mastering the mobile version of Racing Girls, just so she can be a better teacher for John. She ends up eating the same instant noodles she scolded him for, realizing she's just as guilty of poor habits as he is. The next morning, she arrives at the office exhausted but determined to be more approachable. She tells John that he should feel free to ask her questions at any time, but when he politely says he's doing fine, Isuza drips gravy of sadness. She then spends the afternoon hovering around him and trying to look available, yet he never reaches out for help. At this point, Isuza starts getting insecure, especially after she overhears her coworkers gossiping about her. They tell John that Isuza is a total loner who hates social gatherings and never joins the team for drinks. Hearing this, she flees to a nearby park to eat her lunch, like a convicted felon. Isuza continues to work on her phone, and John happens to walk by with the other coworkers. As he watches her from a distance, he is impressed by Isuza's dedication, even during her lunch break. Later that day, Isuza notices that John is still at his desk, grinding away on the proposal. Although she starts to leave, guilt pulls her back, and she makes up an excuse about forgetting some task just so she can stay and support him. As the hours pass and the last train approaches, John finally opens up to her. He tells her how much he admires her work ethic and her past proposals, admitting that he's working this hard because he wants to create something that will make her proud. The sincerity of his words catches Isuza completely off guard, and her eyes begin to fill with tears. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Isuza tells him that he's already doing a better job than she did when she was a noob. When John mentions that he knows she usually prefers to be alone, she impulsively blurts out that she actually enjoyed having lunch with him and didn't find it a burden at all. Realizing she's being a bit too honest, she turns red like a traffic light and orders him to get back to work to hide her embarrassment. However, by the time they finish their work, it's so late that they have to call a taxi. John is so exhausted that he falls asleep on her shoulder, and shockingly, Isuza drapes her own coat over him and wraps her scarf around his neck, smiling to herself as she finally feels like she's beginning to bridge the gap between them.
Let's go.
A few days later, the office is expecting a celebration, as one of their co-workers is getting married. While everyone else seems excited, the news hits Isuza with a wave of dread, as the concept of marriage reminds her of the relentless pressure she's been getting from her mother to settle down. To make things more complicated, their boss decides to combine this wedding celebration with a welcome party for John. He puts John in charge of the planning to help him learn the ropes of entertaining guests and tasks Isuza with guiding him through the process of picking a venue and a gift. While Isuza accepts the responsibility, she's secretly panicking because her introverted lifestyle means she hasn't attended a wedding in years and has no idea what's considered appropriate. Trying to maintain her cool persona, Isuza takes John to a luxury goods store to begin their search. She lectures him on how gift-giving is a vital social skill, all while frantically scrolling through her phone to figure out what people actually buy for weddings. However, her research is interrupted when a pair of dumb and disgusting-looking cat-themed mugs catches her eye. She's clearly attracted by them, but when John suddenly moves closer to get a better look, Isuza fumbles the mug and watches in horror as it shatters on the floor. Immediately, she starts spiraling into self-deprecation, but John handles the situation with maturity. He insists on buying the remaining set himself, claiming he genuinely likes the design. Even though Isuza feels like she's the one who should be paying for her own mistake, John makes the purchase before she can even make her argument. Moments later, the two stop for a coffee break, with blood pumping through their private parts. Seeing her mentor always drink black coffee made her believe that doing the same would make her look sophisticated, so she ordered a cup of plain black coffee despite her own taste. On the other hand, John is perfectly comfortable admitting he likes his coffee with plenty of sugar. As soon as Isuza takes a sip, the overwhelming bitterness nearly sends her into a frenzy. She eventually has to cave and ask John to bring her cream and sugar, feeling like she completely embarrassed herself in front of her junior by trying to act more mature than she actually is. To change the subject, they start looking for a party venue on their phones. During the conversation, Isuza finds herself wondering if John is much of a drinker. When she finally asks him, she's thrilled to learn that he isn't particularly fond of alcohol either. This shared trait makes her feel much more at ease, and she explains that drinking is only enjoyable when you're with people who make you feel comfortable. She promises to attend the party specifically because it's for him, but when John admits he'd like to have a real drink with her someday, Isuza's defense mechanisms go into overdrive. She blunts the moment by saying she's not sharing her kitty with his sausage, a comment she instantly regrets the second it leaves her mouth. The next day, the guilt over her cold response still weighs on her. However, her mood shifts when she finds one of the cat mugs from the store sitting on her desk. John explains that since he only needs one, he wanted her to have the other as a thank you gift. Flustered and touched, Isuza tries to hide her emotions by claiming she'll only use it as a toothbrush holder. But it's clear she's going to put it inside her that night. Later, the office party officially kicks off, and Isuza keeps her opening toast short and slightly cynical to hide her nerves. As she settles in next to the bride-to-be and her boss, she tries to remain professional, but her eyes are constantly drifting toward John to make sure he's okay. When she notices a senior coworker named Koro pressuring John to drink, Isuza's protective instincts take over. She marches over, grabs John's drink, and downs it in one gulp, declaring that she needs to test anything her mentee is given. This bold move gets the social gears turning, and before she knows it, Isuza is actually socializing with the group. Unfortunately, she's not used to alcohol, and she soon finds herself feeling unwell. She then tries to leave quietly, but when the coworkers refuse to let John leave with her, she has to get creative. She re-enters the room with a stern face, lying about a dissatisfied client call that John needs to help her handle immediately. The sneaky little brat understands the game, and the two make a clean escape. As they walk home together, Isuza apologizes for dragging him away and for the scene she caused. They take a seat on a bench, and Isuza finally asks if he thinks she's a scary mentor. Surprisingly, John tells her that he's never found her scary. In fact, he reveals that they actually met before his official interview. Back then, he was a nervous wreck in the hallway, and a stranger, who he now realizes was Isuza, told him to take deep breaths and just treat the interview as a way to get to know the company. Hearing this, Isuza's heart softens, and she playfully agrees that maybe they could share a drink together one day. However, this weird little creepy interaction is cut short when the alcohol kicks in, and Isuza nearly collapses, forcing John to help her the rest of the way home. The following morning at the office, Isuza notices a faint lipstick stain on John's shirt, and immediately jumps to the conclusion that he penetrated someone last night. The thought of him having a girlfriend makes her furious, and she demands an explanation. A very flustered John explains that the stain didn't come from some secret girlfriend. It came from her while he was struggling to help her into a taxi the night before. Hearing this, Isuza's face turns bright red, and in a state of pure mortification, she actually tries to start unbuttoning his shirt right there in the office to go buy him a new one. However, this chaotic scene is interrupted by their boss, who calls them both into his office with a surprising proposal. He wants the two of them to head to Okinawa for a business trip during the upcoming Golden Week. During the flight to Okinawa, Isuza takes a moment to remind John that their itinerary is packed with responsibilities. Rather than being intimidated, John offers a self-assured grin, pledging to sacrifice his nightly sausage-stroking action for the job. Just then, Isuza's attention quickly shifts to the window, where she finds herself captivated by the ocean below. Once they touch down, a representative from the company meets them, explaining that the entire production crew will be traveling to the filming site together. The drive is filled with energetic conversation among the staff, but John stays focused, diligently reviewing his notes. Isuza watches him quietly, noting his dedication until they finally reach their destination. The production begins almost immediately as Nashiko, the featured model, quickly finds her flow, making the entire process look effortless. As John handles the behind-the-scenes recording, he checks with Isuza to see if he is permitted to film during the crew's downtime. She confirms that the necessary permissions are in place, but cautions him to always notify anyone who might end up on camera. John is somewhat perplexed to see that Isuza has also changed into a swimsuit, displaying her honkers, as he assumed only the model would be dressed that way. Isuza explains with a touch of pride that she didn't want Nashiko to feel isolated or awkward being the only one in swimwear, so she joined in to maintain a sense of professional solidarity. John, feeling a bit flustered, suggests that such a gesture wasn't really required since swimsuit modeling is simply part of Nashiko's professional duties. When he sees Isuza's face fall with a hint of embarrassment, he immediately backtracks, confessing that he isn't well versed in the social norms of swimwear photo shoots. Suddenly, a sharp gust of wind catches Nashiko's hat and sends it flying into the ocean. Isuza reacts instantly, diving into the water to save the accessory. She then emerges victorious, holding the hat up with a triumphant smile for the crew to see. Back on the beach, she hands the hat to an assistant, and John quickly steps forward to offer her a towel. Isuza declines, preferring to air dry in the sun while remarking that her choice to wear a swimsuit had actually proven to be quite practical. Caught up in the moment, John claims he'll make sure to wear a swimsuit himself the next time they have a similar shoot. Realizing she might have sounded like a creep earlier, Isuza suddenly becomes self-conscious. At that moment, a male staff member approaches her, raining down compliments on her massive unga-bungas. When the man attempts to touch her arm, John feels a surge of protective instinct and makes a loud noise to disrupt the interaction. Taking advantage of the sudden attention, John nervously claims he needs to check on Nashiko during her break. The staff member apologizes and leaves to get drinks for everyone, and once he is gone, Isuza gives John a playful, appreciative tap on the arm for intervening. As the day continues, the team moves through various scenic spots. John is constantly on the move, recording footage and assisting wherever he can, while Isuza stays close by to ensure he is integrating well with the rest of the crew. By sunset, the physical toll of the day catches up with John, and as he rests, Isuza presses a chilled water bottle against his face. Worried about dehydration, she encourages him to drink, watching him with a fond expression while praising his work ethic. Caught off guard by her own candidness, her face flushes red, and she quickly makes an excuse to leave after telling him to finish the water. Later that evening, the atmosphere is vibrant as the team celebrates their productive first day. The staff credits Isuza for her organizational skills and thanks John for his helpfulness. The mood shifts when performers begin playing traditional music, signaling the start of a dance. The performers invite the crew to join in, explaining a routine where the men perform rock movements and the women perform paper movements. While the rest of the team jumps in eagerly, Isuza is paralyzed by shyness and tries to decline. To support her, John jumps into the dance with high energy, even though he looks like a jelly dog knout shuffling inside a garbage truck. Inspired by her junior's bravery, Isuza casts aside her hesitation and joins him. Seeing her dance beside him brings a wide smile to John's face, and soon the whole team is moving together. At this point, John finds himself struck by how radiant Isuza looks when she is truly enjoying herself. Back at the hotel, a physically drained John reflects on his complicated feelings for Isuza, just when his thoughts are interrupted by a knock at the door. It turns out to be Isuza, carrying skin treatments because she noticed John has a severe sunburn. John realizes he completely neglected to use sunscreen, and Isuza gives him a firm lecture. She reminds him that since they are promoting a sunscreen brand, it's important to lead by example. However, seeing his dejected face, she softens her tone and explains that the sun's rays are particularly intense in this region. The second day of the trip takes them to a lush field under a bright sky. The theme shifts from the beach to the urban city of Okinawa, including a visit to a local shrine where Nashiko draws a fortune for the camera. After wrapping up the final shots at the beach, the project officially concludes. Isuza announces that the crew is free to spend the afternoon however they wish. While the team is excited to explore, Isuza feels conflicted. She wants to invite John to see the sights with her, but is afraid of being seen as a Japanese P. Diddy. Before she can decide, a staff member suggests the entire group go sightseeing together. Both John and Isuza are stunned by the proposal. Isuza, already feeling socially drained from the trip, panics at the thought of more group activities but feels obligated to agree. Sensing her discomfort, John steps in and tells the group he wants to use the free time to brainstorm ideas for their upcoming collaboration cafe project. Relieved to have a way out, Isuza agrees to help him work, and the two head off on their own. Once they are away from the group, Isuza thanks John for the rescue. They decide to go cafe hopping to research ideas. They first visit a peaceful, traditional shop where tea is served in handmade clay vessels like some wild animals. From there, they move to a spot famous for massive, elaborate desserts, watching in awe as a nearby table receives an enormous ice cream. However, their journey ends at a cafe with a stunning view of the ocean at dusk. Though John tries to focus on his notes, he finds himself distracted by the sight of Isuza looking out at the water, wondering if he can rest his sausage inside her mouth. On the walk back, John feels incredibly satisfied with how they spent their time, noting the unique atmosphere of Okinawan cafes compared to Tokyo. Isuza is equally impressed by John's dedication, noting that he never once complained about working during his time off. However, their return to the hotel brings a major complication. The front desk informs them that only one room was booked for the two of them. It turns out that Minori, who handled the arrangements, mistakenly reserved a single room with twin beds. With the holiday rush, Making it impossible to find another room, Isuza decides they will just have to make it work. While taking a bath, Isuza worries about the awkwardness of sharing a room, remembering a similar time she had to share with her mentor. When she exits the bathroom, she finds John packing his bags. He offers to spend the night at a manga cafe so she can have the room to herself, but Isuza stops him. She insists that he shouldn't have to leave, sharing the story of how her mentor made a similar situation fun in the past. To break the tension, she pulls out her phone and challenges John to a mobile racing game. The two end up spending the night surrounded by snacks, laughing, and playing round after round. John notices that Isuza is struggling because she isn't using her turbo boosts, and he takes a moment to teach her the mechanics with a rock-solid flagpole in his pants. However, her excitement and proximity make him blush, which she playfully attributes to another sunburn. As John goes to get more drinks, he realizes the ache in his chest is actually jealousy over the admiration Isuza holds for her mentor. They then play the game until sunrise, and despite nearly missing their flight the next morning, John heads home feeling happy. A few days later, Isuza's morning routine is interrupted by news reports of a powerful typhoon approaching the region. Despite the official advice to stay indoors, Isuza realizes that several critical tasks for the sunscreen PR project require her presence at the office. She hesitates over whether to ask John to come in, feeling it might be unfair to make a newcomer commute in such dangerous weather. However, his assistance is vital for the upcoming meeting. Her mind briefly wanders back to the joy of their Okinawa trip before she pulls herself together, gathering her rain gear and heading out. In her haste to ensure they can both finish early and beat the worst of the storm, she ironically forgets her umbrella. Upon arriving at the office, Isuza is startled to find John already there with his rock-solid biological rod. She masks her surprise with professional instructions, emphasizing that they must work efficiently to avoid being stranded by the typhoon. As they settle in, the atmosphere feels remarkably different with only the two of them present. While the silence is comfortable, Isuza finds herself feeling self-conscious. She tries to remind herself that they have already shared close quarters during their trip, but the thought only makes her more flustered. She catches him glancing at her while she uses the cat-themed mug he gave her, making her almost leak fluids out of her legs. When they finally finish their preparations, the weather has taken a turn for the worse. Looking out at the downpour outside, Isuza expresses concern that John's shoes will be ruined since they aren't waterproof. However, John notices her stylish rain boots and offers a sincere compliment, which compels Isuza to give a shy smile. But she hides her embarrassment by lecturing him on the importance of proper business rain gear before they head out. Once they reach the building's exit, the severity of the storm becomes clear. Isuza is forced to admit she forgot her umbrella, feeling foolish for lecturing John earlier. But John immediately offers her his sturdy umbrella, claiming he has a smaller collapsible one in his bag. As they walk through the storm, Isuza is relatively protected by the larger umbrella, but she notices John battling the wind with his umbrella from Temu, which keeps buckling under the pressure. She suggests they swap, but John stubbornly refuses, insisting on pushing forward despite being mostly in the rain. Eventually, Isuza moves closer to shield them both, arguing that it would be unprofessional for him to arrive at the client's office completely soaked. When John takes the handle to hold it for both of them, his hand briefly brushes hers, making her even more moist downstairs. In such close proximity, she becomes acutely aware of his height and the fact that he is intentionally tilting the umbrella to keep her dry, even at the cost of his own shoulder getting drenched. At the client's office, the atmosphere is apologetic due to the weather, but Isuza remains professional. She leads the presentation of the cafe merchandise, letting John take the lead on the technical details regarding the menu and the integration of the latest game updates. Watching him work, she is once again impressed by his competence. However, she still feels a lingering sense of guilt for needing to rely on him because of her own forgetfulness. The return trip to the office is no easier. Despite Isuza buying a new umbrella, the wind is so fierce that they both arrive back at the office soaking wet. Isuza immediately takes charge, tossing a towel over John's head and drying his hair like a stepmother in corn videos. After suggesting he hang up his jacket to dry, she notices he has simply slung it over his desk. Worried about wrinkles, she picks it up and is struck by the sheer size of the garment. In a moment of curiosity, she tries it on, playing with the oversized sleeves. However, she is mortified when John returns with coffee and catches her in the act. He finds the sight incredibly cute but says nothing, while Isuza attempts to regain her composure by diving back into her work. A few hours later, the storm's intensity grows. While taking a break for a sandwich, Isuza notices John staring out at the rain and teases him for being excited like a kid. John counters by pointing out that she was just playing with his coat, which nearly causes her to choke on her food. However, their playful bickering is interrupted by a violent crash of thunder, which scares the nuts out of Isuza's brain. As she rushes to a windowless area of the office, John gently reassures her. Hoping to grab her honkers while they're alone, he initiates a word game to shoot his shot. His intentional mistakes make her laugh, successfully easing her anxiety until she feels ready to finish her remaining tasks. A few hours pass, and Isuza urges John to head home before the train services are suspended. She explains that she needs to stay longer to finish tasks that can't be done from home the next day. Refusing to leave her behind, John offers to help so they can leave together. Deeply moved by his loyalty, she sends him to the sales department to collect some files while she attends a final virtual meeting. In the sales department, John encounters a senior named Sugahara, who attempts to exploit John's helpful nature by dumping his own overdue tasks on him. When Isuza finishes her meeting and finds John still at his desk, she realizes what has happened. Her patience evaporates and she marches down to confront Sugahara with her jiggling watermelons. She sternly calls him out for misbehaving with a junior and commands Sugahara to handle his own responsibilities, successfully rescuing John from the extra work. The two finally prepare to leave the building, but the wind is now so strong that Isuza is nearly swept off her feet at the entrance. Realizing that running for the station is too dangerous, John suggests they share one umbrella again, arguing that his physical strength will help keep them steady against the wind. Isuza finds herself agreeing, realizing that despite his junior status, John is a very reliable man. As they navigate the wind-whipped streets, a particularly strong gust nearly blows their cover. Immediately, John pulls Isuza closer to his side, shielding her from the force of the storm as they walk towards the station. To their surprise, they discover they share the same train line, an observation they had never made before because of their different working hours. They share a quiet, polite conversation during the commute until they reach Isuza's stop. Before she departs, John insists she take his sturdier umbrella for the walk home, dismissing his own needs. In return, Isuza gives him a small gift as a thank you for his hard work and support throughout the day. Back at her apartment, Isuza hangs John's umbrella next to hers, feeling a strange mix of relief and lingering tension about seeing him the next day. Meanwhile, John settles in at home, sniffing the towel Isuza gave him like a freak, and reflecting on the day with a quiet smile, even considering buying special detergent to care for the item she touched. The following morning, Isuza spends her time rehearsing a simple request. She wants to invite John out for drinks as a gesture of gratitude for the umbrella he lent her during the storm. However, her confidence wavers the moment she arrives at the office and spots him in an animated conversation with a woman named Miho, whom she has never met. A sharp sting of jealousy pricks at her heart, though she quickly stops herself to support John's social interactions. Overhearing them discussing an upcoming fireworks display, she assumes they have private plans and decides to abandon her invitation. However, two colleagues, Akime and Mori, suddenly interrupt John and Miho. They begin pushily trying to invite themselves along to the festival, clearly making the juniors uncomfortable. Seeing John and Miho struggle to politely decline their seniors, Isuza decides to intervene, dressed up as Bonnie Blue. She steps forward and authoritatively announces that she will be joining the group as well. Her formidable reputation works instantly, and Akame and Mori become flustered and quickly excuse themselves. As soon as they leave, Isuza clarifies to the pair that she was only helping them escape, but her plan backfires when both John and Miho earnestly insist that she actually come with them. Later, in the break room, Miho introduces herself as a new recruit from the public relations department. She mentions that she's heard good things about Isuza, which causes John to become visibly embarrassed. The scope of the outing soon becomes clear. All 6 of the company's new hires are attending together. The prospect of being the only senior among a large group of juniors sounds exhausting to the introverted Isuza, but Miho's persistent enthusiasm leaves her with no choice but to accept the invitation. As the festival approaches, Isuza begins to worry about what to wear. She remembers a jankata her mother bought her years ago, but upon seeing a photo of it, she realizes it is far too wonky looking for a professional woman. During a phone call, her mother excitedly assumes Isuza is going on a date, and despite Isuza's denials, she insists on sending money and accessories for a new outfit. Isuza eventually visits a shop where she is nearly overwhelmed by the options. She briefly considers a pattern featuring turtles, but she soon chooses a more classic style displayed on a mannequin. Back at home, she attempts to dress herself using online tutorials. But after an hour of struggling with the complex fabric, she realizes she will need professional help. The next day, Isuza discreetly pulls Miho aside to discuss their plans. When Isuza reveals she intends to wear a yankata, Miho jumps up and down like Elon Musk, as she had been afraid of being the only one dressed traditionally. They discuss the logistics of booking a salon for the occasion. Shortly after, Miho runs into John in the hallway and teases him, telling him to look forward to seeing Isuza in her festival attire, leaving him completely flustered. On the day of the fireworks display, the group of new hires gathers at the station. There is a nervous buzz among them regarding Isuza's arrival, as rumors of her being an intimidating and strict superior have spread throughout the office. John tries his best to defend her personality, describing her as kind and diligent, though his friends tease him, suggesting he only sees her softer side because of her enormous milk containers. When Isuza finally arrives, the group falls silent. She is wearing a beautiful light yellow jankata that complements her perfectly. Her polite and humble greeting immediately puts the juniors at ease, and they realize she isn't the monster the rumors suggested. On the other hand, John is so stunned by her appearance that he can barely speak and desperately tries to hide his flagpole. As the group enters the festival grounds, they decide to split up to explore the various food stalls. Isuza ends up in a small team with John and Miho. Feeling out of her element in the crowded, festive atmosphere, she tries to contribute by offering her wallet to pay for their snacks. Although the juniors initially refuse, she insists on treating them since festival food can be quite expensive. They eventually return with fresh takoyaki, which proves to be a challenge for Isuza. Attempting to follow John and Miho's lead in eating the hot snack, she accidentally burns her tongue. John feels guilty for encouraging her, and quickly buys her some shaved ice to soothe the burn. As they stand in a quiet corner to eat, John reflects on how festival food always seems to taste better than the versions he makes at home. Miho teases him about his cooking, revealing to Isuza that John often lived on a very tight budget during his training because he spent all his money on plastic model kits. Isuza admits she was already aware of his hobby. Watching the two of them banter, Isuza feels a sense of peace, noting how much more relaxed John seems outside the confines of the office. Their next stop is a shooting gallery. While Isuza initially intends to just watch, John and Miho become determined to win a prize for her. Isuza's eyes linger on a small turtle plush, and the pair immediately set their sights on it. However, a wave of guilt washes over Isuza as she begins to worry that they are only being nice to her because of her seniority at work. Overwhelmed by the thought that she might be a burden, she quietly slips away from the booth, intending to find the fireworks viewing area on her own. However, her alone time turns into a disaster as the strap of her sandal suddenly snaps, making it impossible to walk properly. To make matters worse, she realizes she forgot to charge her phone, leaving her stranded like an idiot and unable to call for help. As she sits on a bench watching happy groups of friends pass by, she feels a sense of loneliness. Isuza tells herself she is used to being alone, yet the thought of missing the fireworks with John brings a genuine ache to her beautiful, juicy heart area. But just a few minutes later, Miho finds her, and quickly alerts John that Isuza has been located and reassures the older woman that they were worried about her. Miho takes the opportunity to tell Isuza how much John admires her, and how he constantly speaks of her in glowing terms to the other departments. Before Isuza can process this, John arrives, looking breathless and borderline stressed. However, he doesn't stay upset for long, because when he notices her broken shoe, John uses a coin and a handkerchief to create a temporary repair for the strap. With the fireworks about to start, the three of them begin to rush toward the viewing area. In the crowd, Miho takes Isuza's hand to lead her, and Isuza, not wanting to lose John, reaches back and grabs his hand as well. The sudden physical contact alerts John's little brother downstairs. As Isuza gazes up at the light, she finds herself lost in thought, wondering how much different their relationship might be if they weren't simply a senior and her junior. A few days later, in the midst of a busy workday, a minor communication breakdown occurs while John is handling various documents. Through the glass doors of a meeting room, Isuza attempts to signal him to retrieve her phone from her desk, but her frantic gestures only lead to more confusion. Losing her patience, she eventually has to interrupt her own meeting to scold him for being slow. This encounter leaves John feeling somewhat discouraged, which doesn't go unnoticed by Miho later in the break room. When Miho teases him about the interaction, John admits his sadness and mentions that Isuza tends to slip out profanity whenever she is furious. This detail surprises Miho, as she has never heard her superior speak with anything other than professional Japanese. Shortly after, John's phone becomes a distraction during work hours due to a barrage of notifications from his family asking him to clean the toilets. While Isuza initially dismisses his concern as childish, she quickly feels a twinge of regret for her harsh tone. To lighten the mood, she playfully adopts the nickname John-chan after spotting it in a text preview on his screen, much to John's horror. This leads to a conversation about his home life, where John explains that while his parents live conveniently close, their constant hovering and nagging about his well-being can be a bit overwhelming. That evening, Isuza is faced with the reality of her own empty refrigerator and a lack of domestic skills that would surely worry her own parents. Seeking a quick solution, she heads to a local shopping district to find dinner. Her excitement over the variety of pre-made meals is cut short when she unexpectedly runs into John at the supermarket. Nervous that he might discover she rarely cooks, she struggles to justify her presence in the store. However, the sight of a nearby couple causes a moment of mutual awkwardness. While Isuza feels a bit of lifestyle envy, John finds himself blushing at the thought that they might look like a couple doing their own grocery shopping. During their conversation about home-cooked meals, John admits he would value a partner he could cook alongside or who would practice recipes for him. Relieved by his answer but still wanting to protect her professional image, Isuza pretends she is only there to buy fresh vegetables, even though she wants to buy a cucumber for late-night fun, and a discounted bento box she had originally wanted. The next day, John notices that Isuza's hand is covered in several bandages. Although she insists they are just paper cuts, the sheer number of them makes him suspicious of what she was actually doing at home. Just then, their talk is interrupted by a call from Isuza's mother, Sakura. During a private conversation in the hallway, Sakura's prying questions about Isuza's love life, prompted by the recent photo of her in a jonkata, led to a moment of impulsive frustration. In a desperate attempt to stop her mother from suggesting arranged marriages, Azusa boldly claims she already has a boyfriend before hanging up. However, John is standing nearby with a firm biological rod and overhears the declaration, looking completely stunned. Realizing she might have caused some misunderstanding, she tries to explain her situation. Azusa worries that she has been unintentionally rude to her colleagues by using her harsh tone, but John reassures her that he actually finds her dialect interesting. However, his mind is mostly occupied with wondering what kind of person Azusa could possibly be dating. The situation escalates when Sakura calls back to announce she is already at Asusa's house and expects to meet the non-existent boyfriend over dinner. Seeing her panic, John steps up and offers to play the role of the pretend partner to save her from the embarrassment of her lie. The two stay late at the office to coordinate their cover story. They decide to tell her mother they are co-workers who have been dating for 4 months. To make the lie more convincing, they exchange personal details and are delighted to find they share a common hobby in gaming. This shared interest gives them a much-needed boost of confidence before they head to the restaurant to meet Sakura. Upon arriving at the dinner, John is taken aback by Sakura's remarkably youthful appearance, initially struggling to believe she is Asusa's mother. The evening is filled with embarrassing childhood anecdotes provided by Sakura, making Asusa somewhat embarrassed. Just then, a client calls her, and when Asusa walks away from the table, Sakura takes the opportunity to speak candidly with John about her daughter's introverted nature and her freaky nature in bed. She shares a story from Asusa's elementary school days involving a school festival accident, explaining how Asusa's blunt leadership was actually a selfless attempt to protect her classmates, even at the cost of her own popularity. Sakura expresses her hope that John won't grow to hate her daughter's difficult personality, but John sincerely replies that he could never hate her, praising her good intentions and professional dedication. As the evening ends and they prepare to head home, Sakura catches John off guard by revealing she knew the relationship was a lie all along. She had noticed him referring to Asusa as his senior and realized they were acting. However, she expresses her deep gratitude for his support and is particularly moved by the fact that Azusa feels comfortable enough to use her natural personality around him, which is a sign of true trust. The next day, Asusa treats John to lunch as a thank you gift. When she struggles to express her dislike for the tomatoes on her plate, John easily understands and offers to finish them for her like a beggar on the streets. When Asusa asks what he and her mother discussed in her absence, John simply offers a cryptic smile and tells her everything went as planned. Before the grand opening of the Collaboration Cafe, John proudly reveals a mock-up of an in-game vehicle to Asusa. While she is impressed by the display, she notices that the actual merchandise has yet to arrive. Seeing this, John reassures her that the delivery is scheduled for the following morning, though a flicker of concern remains in the back of her mind. Then she notices the cafe, costumes, and she finds herself secretly wondering if John has a particular fondness for maid outfits, as almost all men are creeps. She quickly masks her curiosity by expressing her professional anticipation for the event. The following day, Asusa encounters Miho as she prepares to head to the cafe. Noticing Asusa's uncharacteristic excitement, Miho decides to tag along under the guise of gathering content for the company newsletter. During their walk, Asusa speaks of John's hard work with a sense of pride that doesn't escape Miho's notice. Miho observes that John seems genuinely happy lately and attributes it to having such a dedicated mentor. However, their positive mood shifts when they arrive at the cafe to find a long line already forming, and John in a state of distress. The merchandise delivery was delayed, leaving the team behind schedule. While Miho is quick to defend John, Asusa takes a more practical stance, reminding him that a professional should account for potential delays. Despite her stern words, she privately blames herself for not offering better guidance the day before. The situation grows more tense when the store manager reveals that several waiters have failed to show up. While Asusa begins coordinating backup staff from their event partners, she realizes the immediate opening is still in jeopardy. On the other hand, John, frantic and unable to find Asusa for a moment, fears she has abandoned him in frustration. However, she surprises him by appearing in the official cafe maid uniform to make his sausage juice leak out. She explains that she will serve the guests herself to make up for the morning's logistical errors. Noticing John's lingering guilt, she attempts to offer encouragement by awkwardly patting his head, a gesture that Miho playfully critiques as being a bit too stiff. Once the doors open, the cafe is flooded with guests. Asusa finds the reality of customer service to be far more challenging than she anticipated. During her first order, she accidentally douses an omelet in an excessive amount of ketchup while trying to fulfill a guest's request for a drawing. To her surprise, the guest is delighted by the mishap. Despite her best efforts, she continues to make small mistakes and feels increasingly outclassed by Miho, who has also changed into a costume and is handling the crowd better than her clumsy dumpers. During a short break, Miho informs John that their additional help has finally arrived. John expresses his worry that Asusa is pushing herself too hard, noting her robotic and nervous demeanor while serving. However, she suggests that Asusa simply wants John to rely on her more, revealing that Asusa even sought her advice on how to better support him. This revelation catches John off guard, as he hadn't realized how much that chick Ichu truly cherished their working relationship. A few hours later, the maids perform a dance routine near the vehicle mock-up. Isuza struggles to maintain her energy and smile during the performance, feeling a wave of embarrassment when she spots John in the audience. Seeing her friend feeling shy, Miho jumps onto the stage, improvising her own dance moves to take the pressure off Isuza. This supportive gesture allows Isuza to relax and finish the routine alongside the rest of the team. As the day begins to wind down, Isuza tries to hand out flyers to passersby, but she is largely ignored by the public. When John approaches her with a drink and a towel, suggesting she finally take a rest, she stubbornly tries to prove she can attract customers. But despite this, she is forced to admit defeat when she sees how much more effective the professional maids are at engaging the crowd. Retreating behind the cafe, Isuza mopes about her lack of charisma compared to Miho. Sensing her low spirits, John tries to insist that her presence is a vital motivation for the entire team. To make her feel more at ease, he begins sharing a series of personal flaws. He is a poor swimmer, he hates peppers, and he has an addiction to play his flagpole every night. He even admits that his hair is naturally curly and requires constant straightening, a fact Isuza recalls from seeing him on particularly humid days. These admissions humanize him in her eyes, making her feel closer to him. Despite John's efforts to cheer her up, Isuza still feels she has many things to take care of before the day ends. Inside the maid-themed cafe, a guest appears to be, pressuring Miho into various poses like a classic freak from an anime. Seeing this, Isuza's protective instincts take over, and she marches over to confront the man with an authoritative glare. Shockingly, her stern expression and posture perfectly mimic a popular character from the game. So, instead of being intimidated, the guest is happy, thanking her for the authentic service and requesting a game with her. Isuza is left completely baffled by the positive reaction to her anger, but she continues to provide the service the guest desires. Later that night, the store manager praises the two for their exceptional work, specifically highlighting Isuza's top-tier service. As they sit in silence, Isuza asks John why her last customer was so happy. John points to a character that bears a striking resemblance to her outfit and aura. When Isuza tries to mimic the pose, John blushes, admitting that while she resembles the character from the anime, she feels more like the master of the house than a maid. John explains that since she is always looking after him as his senior, it's hard to imagine her in a subordinate role. Hearing this, Isuza claims that a maid's job is also to look after people, a point that John finds difficult to argue with. Just as they are about to go home, Miho bursts in and demands that they all go out to have celebratory drinks. As she urges them to hurry, Isuza catches John off guard by playfully calling him Master, and tells him to wash his baby carrot before leaving, just in case. This makes John embarrassed for a second, and Isuza also gets shy by her boldness. A few days later, it's extremely cold outside, causing Isuza to shiver from the dropping temperature. Seeing this, John pulls out his jacket over her shoulders like a total simp. Though initially puzzled, Isuzu accepts the kind gesture once he reassures her that he is perfectly warm, completely unaware that Ritsu is watching the sweet exchange from the office building. A few days later, Isuza is browsing the market for some clothes, trying to build up the courage to go inside a clothing boutique. Just as she considers giving up and going home, John notices her and offers to accompany her to help with her anxiety. Feeling understood by her subordinate, Isuza starts trying on a series of outfits, and each time she emerges, John enthusiastically assures her that every single option looks incredible. Watching her happily head to the checkout counter, John catches himself thinking about how adorable she is, prompting him to literally bang his head against a wall to scold himself for viewing his senior in such a creepy manner. Later that evening, Isuza struggles to offer a casual goodbye rather than her rigid, formal work farewell. However, John matches her energy and keeps her happy, but as soon as they part ways, Isuza's heart sinks into her stomach when she notices another girl grabbing John like a cat in an adoption center. The next day, Ritsu approaches Isuza and hands over her favorite drink, playfully noting that Isuza is acting extremely gloomy today. Miho also chimes in, noticing Isuza's distress and accurately guessing that the trouble is tied to John. Desperate to stop them from intervening, Isuza reveals that she saw John with another girl. Miho quickly reassures her that John would have mentioned having a girlfriend, while Ritsu seizes the opportunity to tease Isuza about her intense investment in their junior's romantic life. Embarrassed about this, Isuza claims that her concern is strictly professional. So, to cheer her up, Miho invites Isuza to a weekend spa trip, and the moment she agrees, Miho immediately texts John to invite him along as well. Later at lunch, John happens to walk past and catches sight of Isuza, laughing happily at Ritsu's stories. A sudden wave of jealousy washes over him, and when he turns back, he nearly collides with Ritsu around the corner. Ritsu cheerfully introduces himself and tells John to take good care of Isuzu, freezing John in his tracks before casually mentioning that he will also be attending the upcoming spa day. A few days later, the group meets up at the spa, where a teasing Ritsu tricks John into admitting out loud that Isuza looks beautiful today. This limpy sausage-wielding John frantically clarifies that he only meant her outfit suits her beautifully, leaving Miho and Ritsu to relentlessly tease him for his lack of confidence. Inside the facility, Isuza decides she wants to hit the stone sauna first, while John mentions he is heading to the regular sauna. Before Ritsu can share his own plans, his phone rings with a work emergency, forcing him to step away. Inside the intense heat of the stone sauna, Isuza tries her best to release her stress, but the vivid image of John with the mysterious girl suddenly flashes in her mind, ruining her peace. On the other hand, John sits in the regular sauna, unable to stop thinking about the affectionate way Ritsu speaks to Isuza. Eventually, the girls move on to get massages, where Isuza stubbornly insists on full pressure to avoid looking weak, resulting in a painful scream that echoes down the hall. Afterward at the baths, a completely blissed out Isuza admits to Miho that she doesn't understand why she is so deeply bothered by John's mystery girl. Miho gently advises her to grab her non-existent balls and ask John directly, reminding her that she doesn't need to act like his superior today. A few hours later, Isuza finds John cooling off outside, and the two decide to take a walk together. When Isuza accidentally loses her footing and trips, she falls right into John's arms, as Ritsu is watching them from a distance. Determined to help these losers trade each other, Ritsu approaches John at the vending machines and claims he actually harbors romantic feelings for Isuza. As they all sit down for dinner, Isuza and John start drinking heavily to battle with their emotions. When John passes out at the table like a beta male, a fiercely protective Isuza loudly accuses the group of sabotaging him. Ritsu teases her for being overly defensive, causing Isuza to snap back that she has every right to protect her precious junior. Hearing this, something inside the drunken John snaps, and he abruptly sits up and angrily declares that he is sick and tired of being treated as just her junior forever. Miho and Ritsu hold their breath for a romantic confession, but Isuza suddenly bursts into tears, weeping about how hard she works to be a respected boss, forcing a mortified Miho to spend the rest of dinner apologizing to the people around them. Once the drunken idiots finally sober up, they are brought outside into the fresh air to recover. Miho and Ritsu decide to head to the outdoor baths, and Miho casually invites Ritsu to join her in the women's section. Meanwhile, John watches in complete confusion as Ritsu complies without hesitation, and his confusion turns to absolute shock when both Miho and Ritsu emerge from the female locker room wearing matching pink robes. It is finally revealed that Ritsu has been a girl this entire time, blending in like a chameleon. With a lighthearted laughter, Ritsu apologizes to John for the elaborate deception, explaining she only pretended to have romantic feelings for Isuza to force John into recognizing his own love for her. As the three girls happily chat and share ice cream, John starts going haywire due to the gender situation and collapses on the floor. That evening, John's sister immediately notices his flushed look and questions who he had been out drinking with, but her inquiries go unanswered as he collapses onto his bed in a deep sleep. The following morning at the planning department, the day begins like any other. It doesn't take long for the women in the office to realize that John is nowhere to be found. Isuza finds his absence particularly strange given his habit of being early, though she tries to stay calm since his shift hasn't officially started yet. However, her concern is briefly interrupted when her phone alerts her to a message from John, who seems to be stroking himself in the bathroom. He explains that he isn't feeling well and plans to see a doctor that morning, though he insists he will return in time for the afternoon meeting. This only serves to frustrate Isuza, who mentally scolds him for being so stubborn about working while sick. During her lunch break, Isuza is joined by her colleagues, Miho and Ritsu, whose newfound closeness surprises her. Miho notes that their recent spa excursion turned them into fast friends after seeing each other's dumpers and knockers, and they spend a moment fondly remembering the relaxation of the baths and the treats they shared. Isuza watches them with a touch of envy, marveling at how easily people with natural social skills can bond. When the conversation turns to John's absence, Isuza explains his situation. Sensing an opportunity, Ritsu suggests that Isuza should pay him a visit the following day. The girl is instantly flustered, terrified that a surprise visit would only be an intrusion of his privacy. However, Miho reassures her that John would likely be delighted to see someone he holds in such high regard. Despite the encouragement, Isuza's anxieties shift to practical matters, as she doesn't have his address and fears his girlfriend might be present. Miho quickly dismisses these concerns by revealing she knows exactly where he lives, and he is a single dork. Under the pressure of her friend's insistence that staying away would be cold-hearted, Isuza finally agrees to go. The next day, Isuza is outside John's apartment, worrying that she is being a burden, and plans to simply drop off the gift and leave. But just then, she is interrupted by the same girl she encountered previously in the shopping district. This girl, Yuki, asks if Isuza is there to see her brother, finally clearing up the misunderstanding. Yuki isn't John's girlfriend, but his younger sister. When Yuki teasingly asks if Isuza is John's girlfriend, Isuza descends into a state of panic. John eventually opens the door wearing a face mask and is visibly stunned to see Isuza and his sister standing together. After a brief moment of frantic tidying inside, he invites them both in. As Isuza enters, she takes in the details of the apartment, noticing John's personal decorations. Yuki introduces herself properly, prompting Isuza to offer her business card like a nerd wacko. John finds the formality unnecessary, though Yuki takes the chance to whisper to her brother about how lucky he is to have such a beautiful senior. Despite John's insistence that he is fine to serve tea, Isuza urges him to rest. The mood lightens when Yuki decides to cook for her brother, and Isuza also offers her assistance. However, the cooking process proves to be a bit chaotic, so John has to intervene when Yuki nearly washes an apple with dish soap. He then notices Isuza holding a knife in a dangerous manner. While the siblings engage in a lighthearted bicker, Isuza focuses on her task. When Yuki sees the finished product, she is impressed by the cute result, though John eventually takes over the rest of the meal preparation himself. Left to wait, John notices that Isuza has carefully carved an apple into the shape of a stupid-looking rabbit. Isuza admits she practiced this specifically because she remembered John once saying he'd appreciate the effort of someone cooking for him. The memory makes her incredibly embarrassed, and she quickly asks him to forget she said anything. Soon, they all gather in the living room around a bowl of porridge. John is genuinely thankful for the food, even though he did all the work. Following Yuki's repeated requests, Isuza sits close to John on the couch. The girl can't help but tease her brother for being so moved by a piece of fruit, mentioning that he is a sensitive soul who cries easily, even over video games. This sparks a lively conversation about gaming between John and Isuza, and Yuki observes how natural and happy their interaction seems. Feeling like she might be a third wheel, Yuki suggests looking through the old photo albums. While they go through John's childhood photos, Isuza can't help but mention how cute he was, accidentally implying she thinks he's cute now as well. As they look through his middle school and high school years, Isuza realizes that he used to play football with his classmates. By the time they reach his college years, she realizes how many layers there are to him that she has yet to discover. When Yuki realizes they are out of drinks, she offers to run to the store, leaving the two of them alone, who are moist about being extremely close to each other. Since the silence in the air is getting too loud, John brings up the spa trip and apologizes, assuming Isuza only participated out of a sense of obligation. However, the chick corrects him, stating she had a great time and that Ritsu even wants them to go again. John expresses regret for his drunken behavior, but Isuza counters by admitting she acted out as well. Then she confesses that seeing him with Yuki in town the other day had bothered her because she thought they were a couple. John is taken aback, asking why a girlfriend would make her feel that way, which leaves Isuza unable to explain her own feelings. To ease the mood, John demonstrates his new coffee drip brewer, carefully preparing a cup for Isuza with the specific amount of milk and sugar she likes. She notices he is using the mug that matches the one she has at home, and he sheepishly admits he loves the design. The conversation turns more serious as Isuza reflects on her past. She shares a story from her school days when she was class president and struggled to manage her peers. After a chaotic incident where a classmate got hurt, she yelled at everyone out of frustration. This experience led her to believe she was naturally bad at socializing and that scaring people off was simply easier. However, Isuza confesses that her perspective changed after meeting John. She tried harder to be approachable for his sake, even though she still feels like she fails at times. Hearing this, John gently reassures her that she has always been doing her best, which tickles the groove between her legs. Unfortunately, their conversation is interrupted as John starts coughing like an old man. Isuza insists he go to sleep immediately, even jokingly offering to sing a lullaby. To her surprise, he takes her up on it. Feeling committed to the bit, she sings softly until she gets super embarrassed. As he drifts off, Isuza stays nearby, organizing his papers and watching him sleep. In a quiet moment of affection, she takes his hand in hers, smiling at how well they fit together. They eventually wake up to a text from Yuki, realizing they both fell asleep. Isuza is flustered by the intimacy of holding his hand, but John is nothing but grateful. He thanks her for her care and adds that he had a wonderful rest. Sensing a shift in their dynamic, Isuza suddenly tells him she wants to know everything about him, from his favorite foods to the size of his carrot. John smiles at her enthusiasm and suggests they become friends in a more personal sense. This time, Isuza excitedly asks if this means they can share lunches and occasionally go out for drinks, all of which John happily agrees to. After the sweet moment at John's apartment, Yuki claims that she wants to cook more meals with Isuza before heading out. This comes as a total surprise to John, who wasn't aware they had made such arrangements. Before leaving, Isuza extends a friendly invitation to John for a future lunch date. Once they are alone, Yuki immediately teases her brother, questioning if he just faced rejection. This forces John to explain the shifting nature of their relationship. They have transitioned from a coworker dynamic to being friends with minimal benefits. Later during lunch, Isuza seems overjoyed while she eats and trades messages with John. Her positive energy is so radiant that it's immediately spotted by her friends, Ritsu and Miho. Miho can't resist playfully asking if she's texting John, and as the group settles in for their meal, the teasing continues. Isuza tries to remain composed, insisting she is simply being a reliable friend and returning his messages. She confesses to her colleagues that she has never really navigated a genuine friendship before, leaving her terrified of making a mistake. This vulnerability is met with suppressed laughter from her friends, which only makes Isuza slightly concerned about her image. However, the conversation eventually shifts to John's upcoming birthday. Isuza is determined to make it a special occasion since she has no prior experience celebrating a friend's birth. Ritsu suggests utilizing the company's monthly group celebration as the perfect venue. When Miho suggests that Isuza will definitely be preparing a personal gift using her own body, the young woman falls into deep thought. Later that day, Ritsu and Miho discuss the slow pace of John and Isuza's bond. While Miho is slightly frustrated by the lack of speed, she feels like they'll soon share a bed. Ritsu points out that while John likely understands his own heart, Isuza remains completely oblivious to her true feelings. A few days later, Isuza informs John about the corporate birthday event. John expresses his desire to attend and asks if they can go as a pair. Isuza enthusiastically agrees, vowing to make his birthday a memorable one. However, her shy nature eventually resurfaces, and she quickly pivots to suggesting they grab lunch. As they part ways to return to their desks, Miho corners John to continue her teasing. She asks if he is truly satisfied with staying in the friend zone, but after seeing his genuine confusion, she decides to drop the subject for the moment. During their lunch together, a distracted Isuza tries to figure out what John wants for a gift without being too obvious. She creates a cover story about a female acquaintance seeking advice on what to buy a male friend. John considers the question, but admits he isn't sure what a guy would typically want from a girl since he's a loser simp with 0 wishes. When she asks what he would personally like, he mentions that a pair of gloves would be practical. This leads Isuza's mind back to a moment when she held his hand while he was sleeping, causing her to turn bright red and scream in the middle of the restaurant, out of embarrassment. Moments later, Isuza goes shopping with Ritsu, but finds herself confused over the variety of materials and colors. Ritsu suggests asking a clerk for help, but Isuza remains determined to choose the gift entirely on her own. Eventually, Isuza finds a pair of gloves featuring cute paw pad designs that she falls in love with immediately. On the other hand, John receives a phone call from Yuki. When she asks what he wants for his birthday, he stays quiet, knowing she will use his answer to demand an expensive gift in return. She mocks his plan to celebrate at a company party, calling him a disgusting loser with a disgusting face that has a disgusting personality. This triggers a memory for John of a childhood birthday, where he tried so hard to please everyone that he ended up offending 2 girls who felt his gratitude wasn't personal enough. As the party draws closer, Isuza works behind the scenes, hoping to keep her involvement a secret so John doesn't feel guilty. She, Ritsu, and Miho spend their breaks preparing, but time is running out. When John invites her to lunch, Isuza panics and brushes him off, leading to office gossip about her strange behavior. Just then, a senior named Akeem becomes curious and realizes John is on the list of upcoming birthday celebrants. Unfortunately, when Isuza is trying to decorate the room, she knocks over a bucket of paint, ruining the banner completely. She is now forced to stay up late to fix the decorations by herself. After office, John offers to walk her to the station, but Isuza sends him away, claiming she has overtime work. However, fate intervenes when John realizes he left his train pass at his desk. So when he returns to the office, he finds the storage room lights on and discovers Isuza trying to hide the ruined banner. Once he sees the mess, he insists on helping her. He suggests they incorporate the paint splatters into a new design rather than starting over. As they work together, the project takes on the feel of a nostalgic school festival. At one point, John notices paint on Isuza's cheek and offers her his towel. Just then, they touch hands and glance at each other for a while. Soon enough, they manage to finish the banner, which looks even better than before. During the day of the party, the event feels extremely well organized. Even the skeptical Akeem is impressed, though she remains prickly when Isuza offers her a drink. John's friends notice how hard Isuza is working as a hostess, and Miho makes sure John knows that she did all of this specifically for him. However, the situation turns tense when the supervisor, Ami, takes all the credit for the volunteers' hard work. When Isuza tries to help further, an irritated Ami accidentally knocks over a stack of boxes. Isuza tries to save the scene but accidentally scrapes her own hand. Now, John takes her to the nursing room to treat the injury and scolds her for being reckless, but Isuza explains that her hard work was all for the sake of his birthday. Before they can say more, Ami enters to apologize and tells John it is time for him to take the stage. With this, John is showered with attention and gifts from several girls, making Isuza feel like her present might not be good enough. But with her friend's encouragement, she finally finds the courage to approach him, asking the other girls for a few minutes of privacy. With a heavy heart, she presents the paw pad gloves, and John immediately puts them on. Seeing that he likes the gift, Isuza gets ecstatic and tries to touch his hand. Just then, when the two realize that they are holding hands in public, John pulls away immediately. However, he soon decides to go along and, looking her in the eye, confesses that he has started to develop romantic feelings for her. After the party, Isuza can't stop thinking about the romantic interaction they had in the office. Though John tried to express his feelings, the dumb chick is still wondering if it actually qualified as a confession. Before any clarity can be reached, John is pulled away to deliver the event's closing remarks, leaving Isuza even more confused. Just then, Miho quickly notices her situation and tries to snap her out of it. But Isuza is so overwhelmed that her only response is a desperate need for a drink. This leads the two women back to Miho's apartment, where they decide to analyze what John actually tried to tell her earlier. While Miho is convinced that John's words were a definitive declaration of love, Isuza remains skeptical, arguing that his phrasing was far too vague to be official. Miho counters this by pointing out that John's affection has been obvious to everyone for a long time, admitting that she and Ritsu have been waiting for him to finally make a move. She suggests that John likely got caught up in the magic of the moment and the thoughtfulness of her gift, leading to an impulsive outburst. Despite Miho's reassurances that a more formal confession is likely on the horizon, Isuza has no idea what to think of all this. Just then, her phone rings and she immediately tries to hide, terrified it might be John calling to follow up. However, it turns out to be a stupid salesman from the office. When pressed by Miho about whether she actually wants John to like her, Isuza finds herself unable to provide a clear answer, as she is still untangling her own complicated web of emotions. On the other hand, John is having his own debriefing session while out for drinks with Ritsu. She wastes no time in asking if he finally crossed the line into a romantic confession. John sheepishly admits that while he didn't give a full declaration, he certainly hinted at a future beyond friendship. Ritsu reminds him that he should always be transparent about his feelings from the get-go. Back at the apartment, Miho continues to probe Isuza's thoughts, asking if she is simply afraid of the complications of an office romance. Isuza admits that the professional setting isn't the issue. The breakthrough comes when Miho asks how Isuza would feel if John had said those special things to another woman. All of a sudden, this dumb chick starts getting possessive and claims that she would hate seeing John with someone else. Recognizing that Isuza is a complete noob when it comes to relationships, Miho tells her that they should not wait for the next workday to figure things out. Instead, they should spend the rest of their time crafting a strategic plan for her to take control of the situation. The next day, the office environment is tense in a romantic manner. Isuza arrives feeling a sting of disappointment that John hasn't reached out to her over the break, but she is determined to settle the matter herself. But Isuza is so flustered that she flees to her desk, leaving John standing in the hallway with his carrot dangling inside his pants. However, he soon apologizes to Isuza and claims that he was out of line the previous day and tells her to forget about it. Feeling let down and frustrated, Isuza's confusion turns into a boiling anger. She feels she has wasted an entire weekend overthinking a situation that he is now dismissing as a mistake. Driven by this anger, she corners him in the office garden. As a crowd of coworkers watches from a distance, Isuza launches into a rant, demanding to know why he called her special only to backpedal. She complains about her lost sleep and her inability to focus on work, insisting that they find a resolution immediately. Before John could get a word in to clarify, Isuza blurted out the solution she and Miho devised, a 3-month trial dating period without any penetration. For a few seconds, John is completely baffled and has no words, but Isuza assumes he is rejecting the idea and begins to get upset. However, he quickly clarifies that he absolutely wants to move forward. On the other hand, Isuza feels the hesitation and decides to head home to clear her mind. Despite the chaotic nature of the confession, Miho and Ritsu celebrate the success of their plan, knowing that the two are finally on a path towards something real. A few moments later, Isuza prepares for their very first trial date. She finds herself overjoyed with excitement, carefully choosing an outfit and heading to the station. She arrives early only to find John already there, having arrived 30 minutes ahead of schedule due to his own anxiety. They then decide to go for ramen, a plan Isuza teases him about, though she is secretly just as anxious. As they walk through the city, they stop by a large Christmas tree. The ease between them begins to return as John reveals he researched the specific restaurant she wanted to visit. This small act of thoughtfulness makes Isuza realize how well he truly knows her. As they sit on a bench together, the physical distance between them closes. They hold hands, and Isuza explains that the purpose of this 90-day window is for them to truly discover who the other person is beyond the office walls. She wants to explore the special connection he mentioned. When they eventually reach the ramen shop, the lines between their lives continue to blur. Isuza accidentally responds when John's surname is called for a table, making them sound like a married couple. Once they're inside the shop, they decide to try out each other's food like a proper couple. This makes them think that they accidentally shared an indirect kiss, causing Isuza to get slightly embarrassed. However, John expertly diffuses the situation by telling her he wants to sniff her watermelon that night. As they finish their dinner, John claims that he wants to have a steamy night with her, and Isuza gently tells him that she wants to have a rough night as well. If you want to see more videos like this, comment watermelon below. Until then, subscribe, like, and share this video with all of your friends.